Please welcome Shachar Levy, founder and CEO of Signia.
Oh, Tim, where is Tim? To talk. No, Colgate Palmolive is a great company, but we are recruiting. Look, it's an exciting day for us because we are launching Signia here in New York City, and we have great friends here at the audience. So again, really thank you so much for coming. Look, the unfortunate, chilling reality in cyber today is that cyber is warfare. We're fighting an enemy, an invisible enemy in many cases, but an enemy. Adaptive, dynamic, and in many cases malicious. A lot of the incident response engagements that we're involved in are very technical, sometimes tactical, and routine in nature. But other investigations are really working with companies who are literally fighting for their survival. And I'm afraid, and I guess many of you will agree that the worst in terms of cyber is probably yet to come. You know, 2 or 3 weeks ago, I had a conversation with the CEO of a multinational. He was talking in terms of his experience standing on the verge of business extinction. Now, this is a quote. That's a company that had successfully survived 2 world wars and was now devastated by a piece of code. Now, what I want to do today is to share with you at very high level few of our observations from these front lines of these battlefields, and an approach which I believe proves to be effective in enhancing the likelihood of companies of actually, using team words, to win these battles. Now, the first aspect should be almost obvious to anyone in this crowd here, and I think it was also reflected in what some of the speakers before me, including Nadav, have mentioned. The attackers are increasingly sophisticated and dangerous. The threats are growing constantly, almost on a daily basis, in variety, velocity, and speed and sophistication. There's a hall of mirrors in terms of who is using which weaponry, and state and non-state capabilities practically blur. And the implication is that it's increasingly difficult for us to make any real well-established determinations about attribution. Attackers also enjoy almost total immunity. And the implication of this is there's no deterrence. So we actually see in many investigations the situation where once we complete clearing the attack from the network, the attacker is trying to come back, time and again, in many cases for many, many months. We end up winning all these battles, but it's a real war of attrition. The second aspect that I want to discuss is the nature of the terrain. Now, our networks are increasingly hard to secure. There's a very simple reason for this. They're increasingly complex. Look, this machine, our laptops, our mobiles are the most complex piece of machine humanity had created. Our networks are increasingly complex. The organizations that rely on these networks are increasingly complex. Add to this what Rick just mentioned, IoT and cloud, and you get really startling complexity. And the simple military fact is that complexity is hard to defend. Now, bring these trends together, the threats and complexity, and I think you understand where this is heading. But here is the thing. A fundamental characteristic of warfare is uncertainty. And on cyber, paradoxically, we have the advantage. And let me tell you why. First, because we know the enemy. It may sound surprising, but the threat is by and large a threat that we well understand. Look, the vast majority of the attacks that we see that hit companies and bring them to their knees, 90%, I think, is a pretty safe estimations, are being performed using the operational art and tactics and techniques that we're well familiar with. Now, obviously, new capabilities and attack techniques are being born every day. Just 2 hours ago, I had a conversation with our VP of Incident Response, Ariel, who was telling me about a new distributed attack format that the team had just identified as part of one of our engagements. So it's an ongoing learning competition. But at the end of the day, we can constitute a pretty sound picture of the vast majority of attacks that companies are likely to encounter. And this is an overwhelming, again, advantage. The second element is about uncertainty. Look, we usually talk in incident response about the fog of war, this intrinsic uncertainty rooted in the nature of combat operation. The reality is, however, that in cyber, while we don't know where the war will come from, we have a certain idea where it will happen. It's within our network. And we own this terrain. Unlike in kinetic warfare, the uncertainty is about us. When we engage companies when confronted with heavyweight attack, the core of the uncertainty is about the network. There are gaps in the understanding of the company, of the topology, of the architecture, of the security fabric, dramatic gaps in visibility. Yes, in fact, there's an entire segment of the network that you didn't even know exists. Now, we can develop a superior understanding of our network. We can develop a very strong understanding of our security fabric. We can develop very deep visibility into our systems. There's no magic about it. Just hard work. It can be done. We can mold the terrain against the attacker. And again, this is an overwhelming advantage. Now, how can these observations translate into action? There's no silver bullet. But the approach that we believe prove effective is about systematically cutting through complexity and building resilience. I'm optimistic because we see companies that have actually taken this road and have been able to achieve a dramatic tipping point in the quality of their security. Overall, 5 building blocks or pillars. The first one, establish a good understanding of your network and your security. This is the fundamental base to build real resilience and to flip the asymmetry against the attacker. Second, the methodology which we use is to stress test the environment against a simulation of massive attack scenarios. This is allowing us to fuse together know thyself and know the enemy, and to capture the dynamic interaction between attacker and defenders. There are other ways to bring in the attacker perspective into the conversation, but my strong recommendation will be, do it. You cannot build your securities against framework or regulations. Thirdly, try to implement a systematic approach of optimizing your security portfolio and maximizing your security ROI. You can't just throw in technologies and engineer at the problem and somehow hope that this will make you more secure. Look, the major distinguishing factor in the capability of companies that we work with to protect themselves against attacks and to sustain attacks is not what they have. It's how they use it. So not surprisingly, when we conduct assessment of companies, I identify all the things that we can do, that they can do, and identify the most high impact possible measures. About 80% is about enhancing your existing technological stack. 10 to 15% is about new technologies on average, and the rest is process. So really, before you go and buy the next generation artificial intelligence black magic something, make sure your EDR is actually deployed across your network and configured correctly, and you have the basic visibility and logging in your systems. Fourth, look, unlike in kinetic warfare, certainly if you have very good intelligence, in cyber, the likelihood that you will have early warning, meaning that you will see the attack is coming, is very low. The blue team is developing an amazing technology, but we don't have it yet. The likelihood of identifying the attack once it's crossing the contact line, what we call early detection, is feasible, but not certain. One of the things that you can do if you have the time and resources is compromise assessment. Preemptively hunt down attacks within your network. This will give you pretty good chances of identifying and eradicating attack at early stage. And last, instead of viewing incident response as something that you do when your defenses fail, look at it as your last line of defense. This can be the difference between a minor blow and a business catastrophe. Now, when we talk in this regard about OODA loop, we refer to the capability of our teams to gain a superior understanding of the situation and to move swiftly across the network, from end to end, from top down to the kernel system. On the company end, OODA loop is about imagining an attack. Training your IT teams to perform in incident response situations and educate your leadership to lead through cyber crisis. Now, look, in the last 12 months, we have been engaging many attacks. In 3 cases, we've been dealing with heavyweight attacks where we believe the attackers are likely to retaliate against the company once they understand that we start to implement lethal measures against them. The technique that we use in these cases is, together with the company, to implement a surprise simultaneous blow across the entire battle space, digital battle space of the company, wiping out the attack before the attacker understands that something is happening. Now, this is a highly complex operation. We're doing the fun stuff. The heavy lifting is being done by the companies. And what's amazing is that they do it amazingly successfully and with very little time to actually prepare. Imagine taking just a friction of these efforts and implementing it ahead of time in building your security. Bottom line, the paradox of cyber is that most uncertainty is about us. By knowing ourselves and leveraging our knowledge of the enemy, we can reduce uncertainty dramatically and enhance resiliency significantly. Now, we may still suffer damages, but I think we have pretty good chances to sustain most attacks, to stay standing, and to maintain the course of business. Now, it may be that this is not as epic as some traditional types of winning, but business-wise, this is still victory. So thank you so much.